Have you ever sat in a courtroom and watched someone you once called family lie so effortlessly it almost sounded rehearsed? Not stumble, not hesitate, just look a judge in the eye and lie with the confidence of someone who believes they have already won. I have. I sat in that courtroom in Austin, Texas, with my hands folded in my lap, counting the ceiling tiles above the jury box. 12. I counted them 3 times just to keep my expression steady while my sister-in-law, Renee, stood at the podium describing me as unstable, overly emotional, and unfit to question the handling of my own mother's estate. And behind her, sitting in silent support, were people who had eaten at my mother's table for years, nodding along. My name does not matter. What matters is that my mother, Carol, spent 31 years carefully and patiently building a life, the same way some people assemble fragile glass. And when she died, someone was already waiting with a pen. My mother raised my brother Marcus and me in a 2-bedroom house in Cedar Park, just outside Austin. She worked as a paralegal for 22 years. She was the kind of woman who kept paper copies of everything, laminated her insurance cards, and once drove 40 minutes back to a restaurant because she thought she might have left a receipt on the table. She was meticulous in a way that made people laugh until they needed her to find something no one else could locate. Marcus is 6 years older than I am. He was always the one who got called first, the one who drove her to appointments while I was still finishing school. I never resented that. What I did not understand until much later was what happened during those quiet hours when I was not there. And more specifically, what changed after Renee entered the picture. Renee was charming, in the polished, attentive way certain people are when they want access. She remembered birthdays, she brought herbal tea, she started calling my mother Mom before Marcus had even proposed. And my mother, who had been lonelier than she ever admitted out loud, opened the door. I noticed things, small things at first. The way Renee steered casual conversations toward money, the way she showed up at my mother's house on weekday afternoons while I was at work. The way my mother once started telling me something over the phone, then stopped mid-sentence and said, "Never mind, it's nothing." I filed those moments away. I did not yet understand what they meant. 2 years before my mother died, she was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. She told me herself, while sitting at her kitchen. The disease progressed faster than anyone expected, and in those final months, she drifted in and out of clarity in a way that still hurts to remember. It felt like losing her in pieces before we lost her completely. 2 weeks after the funeral, Marcus called and said we needed to talk about the estate. I drove to his house, expecting paperwork, signatures, and a difficult but straightforward conversation. Instead, Renee slid a single sheet of paper across the kitchen counter, as casually as if she were handing me a menu. It was not the will. It was a typed summary on plain paper with no letterhead and no signatures. According to that summary, my mother had revised her will 8 months before she died. The house, the savings, and the investment account she had built over 20 years had all been transferred to Marcus as the sole beneficiary. I was left with personal items and a symbolic amount. I asked to see the actual will. Marcus said his attorney had it. I asked for the attorney's name. Renee said they would send it to me. I drove home and sat in my car in my own driveway for nearly an hour. I'm a forensic accountant. I have spent 7 years reconstructing financial records for litigation. I know what last-minute revisions look like. I know what coercion can look like when it disguises itself as caregiving. I know what pressure on a signature looks like. And I knew this much. My mother was careful with everything. Careful women do not suddenly rewrite their entire estate without explanation, while their health is declining and their daughter-in-law is suddenly always in the room.
I didn't call Marcus back. I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia, and she has the kind of stillness that makes dishonest people talk too much. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me one question. "Do you have documents in your mother's handwriting from before the diagnosis?" I did. Birthday cards, a handwritten recipe she mailed me on an index card, a 2-page letter she wrote when I graduated college, folded into an envelope that still carried the faint scent of her kitchen. Patricia told me not to contact Marcus or Renee again about the will. She told me to gather everything and let her work. So I did. For 4 months, I said almost nothing. While Marcus posted renovation photos from my mother's house on social media, new countertops, a freshly painted bedroom, the sewing room emptied out and transformed into something sleek and unrecognizable, I stayed quiet. But Patricia did not. She obtained the filed will through probate court, public record, something Renee apparently had not considered. The revised will was exactly what the summary claimed. It had been executed 8 months before my mother's death, signed, witnessed, and notarized. On paper, it looked clean. Too clean. I reached out to my mother's original estate attorney, Gerald, who had drafted her previous will 11 years earlier. He was retired, but he remembered her immediately. He told me she had contacted his office about 10 months before her death and had seemed, in his words, entirely herself. Since he was no longer handling new estate work, he had referred her to a colleague. That colleague's name was not listed on any document Marcus or Renee had shown me. The notary on the revised will was a woman named Shelley. Patricia located her through the state notary database and sent a formal inquiry. Once discovery opened, we received the log. Shelley worked out of a UPS store in Round Rock. Her notary book showed that she had notarized the will on a Thursday afternoon. My mother's medical records told a different story. That same Thursday afternoon, my mother had a scheduled physical therapy appointment 12 miles away in the opposite direction. She attended it. The session lasted 90 minutes. There was a sign-in sheet. There were treatment notes. There was my mother's signature on the clinic paperwork.
He used the word clarity so many times, it began to sound like a threat. Then Patricia stood. She did not perform. She built. The notary log, the physical therapy appointment records, the sign-in sheet, the mileage between locations. A statement from the physical therapist who remembered my mother from that exact Thursday because they had talked about a television show they both watched. One document at a time, Patricia placed them in front of the judge. The room changed. Douglas objected. Judge Okafor overruled him. He objected again. Overruled. By the third objection, even he sounded less certain. Then, Patricia introduced the handwriting analysis. A certified forensic document examiner had compared the signature on the revised will to verified samples of my mother's handwriting collected over decades. According to the report, the signature on the will was inconsistent in 14 measurable ways. The pressure distribution was wrong. The letter spacing was wrong. The stroke formation was wrong. And most damning of all, the long, curling tail my mother always added to her lowercase y, a tiny habitual mark so consistent the examiner described it as a signature fingerprint, was missing. Judge Okafor removed her glasses and studied the report for a long moment. Then she looked up. Not at Marcus, not at Douglas, at Renee. "Ma'am," she said, "I have some questions for you." What followed was not dramatic in the way movies teach you to expect. It was slower than that, more precise, more brutal. Because truth, when it finally gets the room it deserves, does not need theatrics. Renee's voice changed almost immediately. The polish slipped first, then the certainty. She said she had not known there was any discrepancy with the notary. She said she assumed the attorney had handled everything. She said she was only trying to carry out what my mother wanted. Judge Okafor asked, "What exactly did your mother-in-law want?" Renee said she believed my mother wanted Marcus to be taken care of. The judge asked, "Did she ever say that to you directly?" The pause before Renee answered lasted 11 seconds. I counted. "Not in those exact words," she said. That was the moment it was over.